As I remember Thomson as a very small country town.
Centered around good neighbors and friends and Christian people. Everybody knew everybody.
It was a house that was called during those days and still today as the shotgun house. Those houses were basically 3 rooms, the front, the middle, and the kitchen. And you basically could see from the front clear out through the back. At one point in our house, in those 3 rooms, there was about 7 or 8 people.
And where we lived, we were one of the few families that had running water in our house.
My father died when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I became very attached to my mother. As a matter of fact, I did not want her out of my sight.
Regina was my aunt. She was my mother's oldest sister, and she was a hard-working lady.
Most of my grandparents had passed away, so as I came of age, she was the one grandparent that I spent the most time with. Just, very hardworking lady, very sweet and kind. I know everyone probably says that about their grandmother.
Grandfather was named Henry Foley Wilson. My grandfather was blind. As a matter of fact, the only grandchildren that he actually saw was LMA and myself.
He was the smartest blind person I have ever seen or met in my life.
I recall spending time with Henry when I visited Thomson as a child. He had lost his sight, so he was blind, but I always found it fascinating to watch him count money. He would feel the coins and he would know how much money he had. He would have me bring him the telephone. And at that time, it was kind of that rotary phone, and he would, count the buttons and dial his own and remember all the phone numbers, and at this time, he's quite senior, and it was always fascinating to me how amazing his memory was.
My grandfather spent some time in Tuskegee. My grandfather went blind around about that time. It was during that time that Black men were being injected with the virus syphilis. So we kind of think that maybe he got caught up in that.
My grandmother was Mary Ella Farrell Wilson. She was born in Washington, Georgia.
To my grandfather, she was the judge. My grandmother very seldom smiled. She only told you something one time. She did not repeat herself. If she says, Bakari, bring me a glass of water, that was it. It is best that you heard that.
Well, when she spoke, you listened. She didn't have to speak to you but one time.
I was afraid to bring my friends home with me because she talked to them just as if she was talking to us.
In order to succeed and to be successful in this world, you had to get your education.
But she was a loving person. She loved flowers.
People would come by and say, Miss Wilson, or Miss Mary, or Miss, can I have one of those flowers that's sitting on your porch? She said, sure. But guess what? You don't have to ask me for the flower. Just come by and steal you a piece. That's what make them grow so pretty.
Never did we live on a farm. We never lived on a farm. But you would not be able to tell that by the different kinds of fowls that we had. And as a result, I became very attached to raising either chicken, ducks, guineas, pigeons.
He loved pigeons. He loved pigeons. And he had marbles, and he didn't want me to touch his marbles. And I used to sneak and touch him. And he could tell when I be done touched him because I didn't know how to put him in place like he did. And he would tell on me.
I know he did odd jobs about town, yard work, kind of the typical teenage type work.
As a young black kid, many times you worked in the white people houses, okay? You may have been asked to dust the furniture, scrub the floor, that kind of stuff. And in the meantime, while you were there, you looked around. And many of them had very beautiful artwork. So that kind of was fascinating for me.
I don't think he could have been raised any better because of his grandparent and his mother. But she instilled in him that she wanted him to do better than she did, his grandparent coming up.
She was a housewife. She washed clothes. She washed clothes for the sheriff. She washed clothes for the police chief. She washed clothes for you name it, she washed them. Lennon and I probably was about in the 3rd and 4th grade. It was before day on a Sunday morning. It sounded like a parade. Everybody seemed like they was blowing their horns at the same time, or bomb, 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 doing that. And I said to my grandmama, him and I, because it woke everybody up. And it was like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. It's a parade. We want to see the parade. My grandmother said, and I quote her to this day, "Babies, that's not a parade." She said, "No, that's the Ku Klux Klan." She says, "Agnes, go in your daddy's shaving kit and bring me a razor blade." Back then, looked like everybody had green vanilla blinds. You could let them up. Everybody had green blinds. She took that and cut a hole so that we could peep out to see what was going on the street. Well, cut the light on. She says, "No, you don't cut lights on when the Klan is in your neighborhood." My grandmother could pick out everybody she knew driving those cars. She says, "There's the sheriff, there's old Charlie, there's old so-and-so." "How do you know?" She said, "I know because I washed their clothes."
Sarah and I basically was like sisters and brothers. As a matter of fact, everyone thought that we were sisters and brothers. When she introduced me, she would say, "This is my first cousin brother." One thing after the meal, we had to wash the dishes. So one of us would wash and one would dry. So when Sarah did not want to do this, in my opinion, she would lie to my grandmother. "I'm not doing a very good job. I'm slinging water," And so my grandmother says, "Well, okay, Sarah, you come on out. Let him do everything by himself."
We grew up together. We were like brothers and sisters, and we still are. But one thing that I remember so well, I taught him how to tie his shoes. He did not know how to tie his shoes. He don't like for me to tell that one, but that's a good one.
But she was a loving sister. We got along very well. Like now, we may talk 2 or 3 times a day.
Even to this day, they spend time together, laugh, and families come together. So it's really amazing, a really beautiful thing to see.
Okay, to Lenton, I'm a 3rd cousin to him. He's like a brother, though. We were raised up. His grandfather and my grandfather are brothers. He and I played football and ran track in high school. And track, he might have been a little faster than in track because he's about 6'4", and I'm only 5'11".
No, he loved sports. He used to run track. He played football. He played basketball. But I didn't do any of that. Mm-mm.
Well, we started school and we found out in the 1st grade that we were cousins and family. The other thing is that We joined church the same time. We was about 9 years old, and I'm still a member of the same church, Springfield Baptist Church, where I have been for, I guess, 69 or 70 years. And the birthday of the church is 149 years. So that was our family church.
It's the largest Afro-American church that's down there right to this day.
After leaving home, my mother really didn't want me to go, but I was very shy. I was very shy.
But probably a little bit more reserved and quiet, not very loud or boisterous.
Always nice. He had a very nice personality. I don't know anybody that grew up with us had a problem ever with Lenton.
I know he also worked at Sears as he got much older. I know that was kind of a very important experience as far as him deciding to go on and go to college.
Wasn't anything wrong with it, but I saw this old man who had been working for Sears for, I would say, some 30 or 40 years and getting ready to retire. And he was the janitor, sweeping the floor. And I looked at that guy. I said, is this me 40 years from now? I says, no. I decided that maybe I should give college a try because working was not really working out for me. So I decided that I would save my money and use that to go to college.
Been working for some time, saving money, and started thinking through, what am I going to do next? He had his eye on an automobile and was kind of all prepared to go forward with that. And then I guess started thinking it through a little bit more.
But I had to make a decision as to whether or not I would use this money and go to college or buy this 1957 black on black Chevy 2-door. And that was a very hard decision to make, being a young man at that age and having to make that decision. So I made the decision to go to college.
He's told us that ultimately he feels like that was, obviously the best choice long term.
And I believe at that time, college was very cheap compared to what it is now. I only paid maybe $75 per course. That first quarter was really rough. I made from A through F, and anything else that was in the alphabet I made. I called my mother and I said, hey, look, college is not for everyone, and I'm one of those that it is not for. I'm getting out of here. And my mother says to me, why don't you stay through the next quarter? It could very well be just an adjustment problem that you're having.
I think her influence was critical in her pushing him as far as making sure that he worked very hard to, go after things in life, whatever opportunities were there to take those, even if that extended outside of, Thomson or even Georgia, to go after that. And he did. And I think that was a lot of her influence.
The Royal Peacock is a club that was organized by Black people. It's on Auburn Avenue. Auburn Avenue is a Black district in Atlanta, okay? They had live entertainment. Oh, Lakita, child. Your dad and I done seen just about everybody in the world that was back in the days, in the 60s. The Supremes, the Spinners, the Manhattans, the Temptations, Otis Redding, Sam Cooke, you name them, we've seen them all. James Brown, oh yes, all of that, Lakita. And they was at the Royal Peacock. You dressed to go to the Royal Peacock. And you went in there and had a nice time and a nice party. That picture, Lakita, Jody, wait a minute. Me and your Uncle Joe was at the Royal Peacock right there, Lakita. That's where we were, honey.
But when I went off to college, I had to take this course in art appreciation and music appreciation. Hated both. I'm going to be a big time basketball or football coach. But by the time that I completed the art class, I had kind of fallen in love with art. We had a art teacher, chairman of the department, Mr. Cedarberg. All over our fine arts building would be his work. And I would just stare at those pieces of artwork. And there was one piece that was very puzzling to me. That piece was called The Crossroads of Life. And based on that, I began to understand more about, and this was an abstract piece, by the way. Each and every day in the science building, this is when I'm in college, in the anatomy and physiology class, this young lady would always be standing outside of the class talking to another young man.
I know they met at Albany State. I know they were both working on getting degrees in education to be teachers.
For whatever reason, I was always attracted to tall, slim young ladies. And she fitted the bill. But I told you I was very shy. I would not approach her directly. So I had one of my roommates had a class with her. And I said, hey, I like her, talk to her for me. Get her phone number, you know. I mean, if that was going to be any rejection, she was going to do it to him, not to me. And so he did. And so about 3 or 4 days, I decided that I would call her and chat with her because she lived in the city. I lived on campus. I finally made that call. And I asked her after several conversations for a date. And she agreed.
I'm sure my mom would make jokes about my dad having a lot of different girlfriends when they were in undergrad.
She had been away for a semester. I had been talking to someone else. But I informed her that, hey, my main lady is coming back and this has to end. And this particular day, Loretta and I was upstairs in the library. And the other young lady comes up and she sees my buddy. She said, hey, where's Kirk? He says, he's upstairs in the library. He's waiting on you. Oh my God. This young lady was very, I don't know what you would say, but she would want to embrace me and all of that. And when I saw her coming, I said, holy cow. And I jumps up and said, hey, look, I don't forgot what her name is now, but this is my girlfriend I was telling you about, you know. And she said, okay. And that was the end of that relationship. But for my buddy, I promised him that I would get him for that. But unfortunately, I did not. But boy, that was a dirty trick.
He told me about it. He used to come visit, and he told me about this real pretty girl with this long hair down her back. And he said her name was Loretta. And he told me that one day he was going to marry her. I said, marry her? You better go on to school. And he said, well, she's in school and I'm in school. And he said, one day you'll get an opportunity to meet her.
Well, I liked her from Jump Street because she has always been one of my favorites. Because she has a lot of wit about herself.
I remember stories of my mom making fun of my dad's nickname. He's a tall gentleman, so his nickname was Shade Tree. Whenever we go back to Georgia to visit somebody, she would always start calling him Shade Tree.
I believe it was in about 1967. I had been classified 1A. If you don't understand the classification, 1A is an individual who is just waiting to be drafted. You are next in line. Because I had pleaded my case to the good white folks back in Thomson, and they weren't hearing none of it.
He had gotten married and a child was on the way, and they still want to draft.
You know, you have gone away to college, you've got to go to the military. Because most of the other boys of my age who did not go had to stay home and bring in the crops. You see, they worked on the farm. Those individuals like myself who went to college was good pickings to be drafted and sent away.
And just the magnitude of things that he was like thinking about and dealing with at his age versus my age, and just how different that is. Like, for example, having to think about trying not to go to Vietnam so that you don't die with, other people, fighting in a war that you really don't believe in or has no impact on your life, right? That's like a life or death situation and all the weight that comes along with that. Whereas I'm just focused on, how do I do better at my job today, or like make a little bit more money? Like, it kind of puts it all in perspective and makes me thankful for like the sacrifices and stuff that he went through and Loretta went through, that so I can just focus on the simple stuff that's important, but still easy in comparison to that.
So I came back and I told Loretta, I said, look, I'm not going. I say, you can call me a draft dodger, or you can call me whatever you want. I'm not going. I'm out of here. Canada, here I come. So I told her, I said, hey, look, either you can come with me or you can go. I'm taking you back home. So she decided that she was going to tag along with me.
People that was being chosen to go serve in the war that was going to Vietnam was people of my color and his color. And a lot of them were not coming back home.
So I was talking to one of my friends' brother, who was Jimmy Ramsey, who had been in the military. See, I had no idea that you could go to the Selective Service Board and ask for various kinds of information. His office was here in Atlanta. So I took the bus from Albany up to our Atlanta. When I got here, which was a week later, I explained to the receptionist, who was a military person, that I was here to see the commander of Selective Service. So about 5 minutes later, this guy comes out in all military from head to toe and looked like he was maybe about 60 or 65. I said, oh, hell, this is over. I said, he figured too that everyone should go into the military. I explained my case to him, and he said to me, don't worry about it. Whatever you are eligible for, you're going to get it. And at least about a month later, I got the letter stating that I had been granted the 2SC. I had several friends who went into the military. They did that 6-week training and was sent directly to Vietnam. Most of those individuals never returned.
The oldest one was born in 1919, and me, the youngest, I was born in 1946. Well, it was 13 of us. I was number 13. It was 3 girls and 10 boys.
She's the youngest of 13 children, 10 brothers. And I just know that she grew up near Blakely, Georgia, in an area called Sandy Bottom.
Whenever we'd go to Georgia to visit my mom's side of the family, she would always take us back to where she grew up. And it was down a windy, dusty road. And we would get there and it was overgrown. But she's like, nope, this is where I grew up.
During that time, we didn't have telephones because we lived way out in the country. Sometimes my brothers would have to help on the farm, so they didn't go to school that day. So I was the mailman. I had to bring the letters home to them from the girls and take them back the next morning to the girls. So they did cursive writing and I couldn't read it.
She said, having a whole host of brothers and sisters, a lot of whom were kind of more like aunts and uncles in a way, because by the time you're coming along, a lot of them are out of the house and things like that. So she was definitely a lot closer to her brothers that were closer to her in age, like her brother Nimai and also her brother Jack.
We was at the same school, and the first day she was there, she just walked around holding with the hand in my back pocket as much as possible. When I was out in the, when recess was going on, I was out in the schoolyard and stuff trying to play. And she wanted to hold a hand, follow me around. Because she was my younger sister, and I always, wanted to see after her and protect her. She had a little problem with me braiding her hair and stuff while she was attending school. So that was something I don't think made her too happy. We was attending a one-room school that was a church also, that my grandfather founded.
I learned how to drive on the tractor, with the tractor, because when I got home with the letters after school, my brothers would read them, and whoever was driving the tractor, I would drive the tractor while they read the letter.
She said she would sit on her brother's lap, and she would steer, and he would shift the gears, of course, because it was a tractor.
You didn't have washing machines, and at that time we didn't have refrigerators. So it was a complete different thing.
So it sounds like it was a lot of work, definitely a lot of work, but also kind of a lot of fun in that community.
Unfortunately, my mother's mother had passed away before I was born.
She was in a car accident with my sister, and she was in the hospital for a while before she passed away.
Okay, when I went to college, my brother, Nora, I lived with my brother and his family. I had 3 brothers living in Albany, and I lived with one of my brothers and his family.
After graduating from college, I needed a summer job. And so the intent was to come to Chicago, work for the summer, and then return back south.
From the stories that I hear, it was supposed to be a short-term thing for a year or 2.
But I started thinking, I said, now look, in Waynesboro, that contract that I was holding was for $3,200 a year. In Chicago, they were paying $6,500 a year. I said, hold up now. 4 years in college, I did learn how to do one thing, and that was add, subtract, and multiply. And look, I'm gonna make a few extra dollars here if I stay here. So my wife had always bugged me about moving back home. And I said, well, okay, we will work this year and then we will move back. Then that year rolled around, the salary increased. I said, we will move back the next year. And that went on for 38 years until I retired. Here I am. I did keep my promise by coming back. I just never said when.
Just understanding from history and kind of looking back at that time period, it's, just kind of interesting to understand that their move kind of coincided with the tail end of that period in time when a lot of folks were moving out of the South, and pretty much a lot for the same reasons, as far as kind of expanded opportunities for work. That's always, kind of an interesting point, to realize that my parents were a part of that.
So I did have 3 aunts that lived in Chicago, and One of the favorite of the three was Agnes. Agnes is deceased. She was just like a sister. She was like a sister to me. She was who I came and stayed with only for about a month.
Every so often, me and my brothers would end up going to Chicago to visit or something like that because I loved her and it was my sister. And I enjoy spending time with her.
Early married life, when they first moved to Chicago, they lived on, I want to say, the west side of Chicago. On the street was called Lockwood, I believe.
My first apartment cost me $125. And I'm saying, hey, hold up, that is a lot of money. And this is for 3 rooms. I say, at home, I can rent an entire house for $35. And here they want $125. I said, I'm gonna try this for a while, but I don't think this is gonna work.
My mom went back to school so she could finish working on her degree.
She finished college actually in Chicago. She left Georgia before she finished her degree there and did finish her studies in the Chicago area, and also her master's there as well. They both finished their master's in Chicago. And once she finished her degree, was able to be elementary school teacher in the classroom.
Since she was a teacher, I remember as a kid, she used to help me. She would have me help grade her papers. And she'd be like, here, do this stack. And I'd be like, I already did my own work. Now I got to go check some other kids' work. I was like, this is horrible.
He worked in education, in guidance and counseling programs. And he also worked, I think, with a security company at one time, and then also worked at 777 Michigan, which is a high-rise.
Matter of fact, he worked 2 jobs here. He worked at Sears and Roebuck. He worked at the Varsity. He used to work because he loved the money and loved pretty things.
After graduating from college, I got a part-time job because I was fascinated about the artwork on weekends. Roland, who was a friend of mine from Columbus, Georgia, who's now deceased, we would go to look at art. One of the individuals that ran a gallery, his name was Dan, and he had opened up a gallery there on the south side. He kind of directed me as to certain pieces that maybe I should purchase. Didn't have a lot of money because I'm working a part-time job. And one of the reasons I'm working this job is because of the fact my wife is saying to me, you are spending too much money on art. I said, well, man, I'm gonna have to find me a part-time job because this is my passion. That habit has become an addiction.
I just remember as a kid, almost every Saturday, it was going to an art gallery or going to a showing. I would want to go play with my friends and they'd be like, well, no, you got to come with us. Again, I was pretty young. They would say, no, you got to come with us. There's this art exhibit at this art gallery in Chicago. I know somebody there. Let's go look at this art. From a standpoint of artwork's always around, so I didn't think anything of it as a kid. I just thought we got a lot of artwork. Okay, that's what my dad loves. But then as I got older and friends started coming to the house, that's when I really became aware of, this is a little different.
Well, as long as I can remember, art's been a part of my life. So by the time I came along, he was well into art.
One of his other big things that he loved to do was going to secondhand stores and finding artwork there where he'd find hidden gems or he'd find something at a secondhand store. So he could tell you every secondhand store between probably downtown and the west side of Chicago, because he'd probably been to all of them multiple times.
I think for him, part of it is the storytelling, part of it is the history. that visual storytelling. A lot of the art that he collects depicts different points in time, different events.
I've met a lot of great artists along the way. One of our favorite is Annie Lee. I was very fortunate enough to purchase some of her work when it was cheap. You know, it is not cheap now.
So I remember in their house in Chicago, I'm not sure where it is in the house in Atlanta, but there's this huge art piece of like these people in a church and they're like dancing kinda, and it's really like stylized. But I think that huge one is one of my favorites because when you'd walk down the staircase, you'd see it like every single day. And it's like a really massive piece of art. And so I think is one just as a kid I was attracted to, mainly because it's huge, but it's really interesting and something I associate with their place in Chicago and with them really.
That man got so much artwork, and he done gave everybody some but me. Do you hear me? He haven't given me not one piece. Joe, he haven't given me one piece.
I should hope that that passion will be passed down through my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, because those are the individuals who are going to reap the benefits. I'm not going to reap the benefits.
And he had artwork, and my father, and he was telling us about his different artwork. I wanted to own art as well.
And then he worked at the Boys and Girls Club as well, coaching basketball.
I also did a little coaching of basketball. Some of the well-known guys that you all may know, I worked with them during the summer months in after-school programs. One of those individuals was Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah, and another one was he played with Dallas, Mark Aguirre. And I would come home, meaning to Thomson, and I would see some of my teachers, and they would say to me, "You need to come on back home and work." But I enjoyed working in Chicago. I don't think I would have traded the experience.
Of course, coming up in Chicago, my mom was an avid Oprah Winfrey fan. So she had to watch Oprah all the time. Whenever she was home from work, she had to watch Oprah. 74, so a couple years before I was born, they actually moved to Oak Park.
As a child, them talking about these milestones, you know, things that they were accomplishing and how they were accomplishing these things together. Oh, I do remember, Daddy, when Uncle Lenton became a principal, about how they were proud of him, you know, becoming a principal.
Our grandparents, Lenton and Loretta, would take us around the city and just like introduce us to all the people and stuff they knew there. So I remember one summer, like Lenton took us to this guy he knew who does t-shirts, right? And got us like airbrushed t-shirts of ourselves and like different characters. I actually think I got like a Harry Potter airbrushed t-shirt like one summer when that was pretty big. So that was cool and little stuff like that. We also have a lot of family in Chicago that we didn't get to see other than when we were up there with our grandparents. So they took us around that side of our family so we could get to know them some more. I would say they were very much in the like fun grandparents category because we only got to spend like a significant amount of time with them over a couple weeks in the summer. So when we were there, it was like we got to do like whatever we wanted, like stay up all night. They like would buy us stuff sometimes because like growing up, I didn't really like get like video games and stuff all the time. It was really like when I was at my grandparents over the summer and then at Christmas. And so like I would always look forward to going up there with them and just really having a good time with both them and my sisters, just hanging out and enjoying each other's company.
Growing up outside of the Chicago area in Oak Park, Illinois, I think they were pretty strict parents. That's probably where I'd say.
This is a dictatorship. This is not a democracy. You will fall in line or you will fall down and be dragged. So I remember very vividly. Oh, it's probably traumatizing. Multiplication tables. Oh, those multiplication tables. Again, since my parents are teachers, so they were not short of training material for me to work on when I came home. And I remember I would have to get a little black marker and I would have to sit there and go. And it had to be probably about, I'm going to exaggerate now as an adult. At the time, it seemed like 800. It was probably like 45 or 50 multiplication problems. And I remember I would have to go through there and do every single one of them. And if I got one of them wrong, she would get a wet paper towel, erase the whole thing, and make me start again.
Both were just very goal-oriented around education in school and getting that, and also, exposure, piano lessons, violin lessons, just wanting to kind of create the space where you could kind of explore and, discover your talents. Definitely the focus on education was always there. I mean, going to college was an assumption. It was not discussed in terms of it being, what would you like to do? It was more like, this is what you'll be doing, so what would you like to study? And here are some suggestions. I think that was good though, because then it was always, as a child growing up, you kind of have it in your mind, like, this is what's expected. This is, kind of the natural progression. And so it just wasn't something you really thought about a lot. It was just a matter of where you're going and, what the studies would be.
I remember getting made fun of at school. They said I read really well. Like in a class to read like a passage and I'm like burning through it. And they're like, well, how did you know how to do that? It's well, because my mom probably made me read that passage 4 times last night before I went to bed because I had to read ahead. That was what their one big thing. I remember my homework assignment said I had to read page 22 to 25. Okay, I read page 22 to 25. They'd be like, no, you read page 22 to 25 and then you go to 40 and then you go back and you read 22 to 25 again and make sure you understand how that relates to everything that came after that.
Yeah, one thing I would say that Lenton is really similar to my mom is in the sense of just like being like disciplined and the importance of like hard work and setting up like a good financial foundation for yourself, and like those sorts of lessons that I got from my mom, I really feel like started with my grandparents and with Lenton.
And let me tell you what my granddaddy used to tell us. You go to school, you learn all you can learn. What you learn up here, can't nobody take it from you. So you learn all you can. And he said, you go to school today, you learn what you can today, because tomorrow might not be promised to you. That's what Henry Wilson used to say.
I think probably what I admired of Loretta's style, probably a little on the kind of old school, some would say, a little low on the talkback tolerance. And so that's probably something that I probably carried forward with my kids, just kind of having a lower tolerance for a lot of talkback. Yeah, tried to keep that at a minimum. It seemed to work out okay.
The things I would take away from my mom, the empathy. When you had a bad day, you didn't have to tell her you had a bad day. She could see it on your face.
I'd say one way Loretta is really similar to my mom is that they're both kind of quiet on the outside, but like once you get to know them, they're very like silly and fun to be around and love to have a good time. And so that like difference between like when they first get to meet someone and like once they've gotten to know them, that like shift I think is pretty fun to see.
He don't downplay her, she don't downplay him. They respect each other. They communicate. They've always, I think, communicate. They talk to each other. They have some of the same ideas on how they wanted things to be, what they wanted in life. Their children, how they raised their children. Yes, she loved him and he loved her.
I know he was always real kind and he loved her and he was a good husband. He took care of my sister and they seemed to be happy together.
It was just my father and my grandmother when he was growing up for the most part. It was the two of them.
We visited her every summer that I can remember growing up as a child. As she got older, she would spend several months of the year in Chicago with us, primarily around the holidays, Thanksgiving through the first of the year. So that was a great time. She would come north and spend time with us.
Especially if he didn't come home, she would go on there to spend some time. Plus, she always wanted to see the children.
Sammie also lived in Thomson, so they would probably see each other weekly, and we would always see him when we were south for the summers.
But we were real close because she was just like a mother to me. And everywhere she went, I would take her to the grocery store. And she was the first African Avon lady here in Magnificent County, so I would take her to deliver Avon and all that.
My dad really wanted her to be in Chicago, especially when she was starting to get ill. He wanted her to be there. And I think it wasn't due to his lack of wanting her to be there. I think she still wanted her independence. And I think she didn't want to leave Georgia. And I think out of respect for her, he didn't push as hard. And maybe now in retrospect, maybe he wished he would have pushed a little bit harder.
Really had to know her, and you wouldn't have to be in her presence for 15 or 20 minutes to see what kind of fine person she was. I'm not saying that because she was my aunt. That's the kind of person she was. She loved everybody. I never heard my auntie put anybody down in any mean, ugly way. And if somebody did something ugly, she'd say, well, they'll do better next time. She was just as honest and straight a person as I can tell you. I tell you, when she passed away, that was rough. That was rough. Very rough.
Well, I was the one found her after she didn't answer the phone or either the door. And since she had passed when I found her, and I come back and got my wife, and my wife went over next door with me, and then we called 911. So when we called Lenton, he was hurt, so he had told me, saying, well, she slipped away from me. I told him, yeah.
Well, growing up, she was the grandparent that I'd spent the most time with that I could remember. So obviously very sad. I remember whenever we came south to visit her, she would always call, when I talked to her before we would come down, she said, what do you want me to have for you? And she loved to cook. And I said, oh, chocolate cake. So she would always have this, 3-layer yellow cake with chocolate icing. And that's kind of one of my favorite memories, always, getting down to Thomson, going into her house. And she'd be like, I got that cake for you. And that's kind of one of my, favorite memories, that she was always, wanting to take care. The loss of a parent is significant. And so I think that it just took a lot of time.
We've always tried to get them to come back, to get them to go to Georgia. That's where they're from. That's where a lot of our family still lives. So for the last, I would say probably ever since Lakita and Anthony were in Georgia, we've always talked about getting back.
Right now, Lenton and Loretta have moved from Olympia Fields. They've moved to Smyrna, Georgia, outside of Atlanta, to be closer to family. I know they've thought about, moving for years and years.
I wouldn't have never thought he was going to move back, because they always said, well, we're going to move back, and they never did.
Now having them in Atlanta, they have Sarah and their other kind of friends they grew up with close by. They have us close by. And so really we can just get to spend more time together outside of larger occasions.
And I have the song at church. I tell the choir, give me my flowers while I live. I don't want you, when I'm stretched out in that casket, I ain't gonna smell no flowers. I'm not gonna see them flowers. If you want me to have some flowers, give them to me while I live.
I think the trajectory that they've always tried to set for, children, grandchildren, is just very high expectations, with the only limit being yourself, selecting your goal and kind of going after it, and pretty much kind of establishing that you don't have a lot of excuses. Them sharing kind of the stories of, them growing up, what their opportunities may have been during their generation, have really, I think, propelled me and my brother, but also their grandchildren, in realizing that they have had a lot more, so to speak, And so a lot more is expected, and that they, should go after whatever it is that they want in life.
In the time he did, everyone didn't always have a ton of opportunities, and you really had to work hard and maximize what you did have. And so I think Lenton and Loretta and my parents passed down to us the importance of taking advantages of the opportunities you do have, because they're not always around for everyone, and just like never forgetting that fact. Yeah, I think that's impacted me a lot, right? Because that sort of like discipline and approach I take to everything, I think really started with my parents and grandparents, and is sort of instilled in me through them. And so I think that impacts everything I do, today still.
They instilled a lot of humility and humbleness in us growing up as kids, and I think they never wanted us to forget where they came from, and I think that is, to this day, they always remember where they came from, and they appreciate everything that's gone on in their marriage, and they've tried to instill on Lakita and I that love of your spouse and growing together and continuing to grow and raising your children to have that same respect and love for your spouse. So that'll be one thing I always take away from my dad. It just always the professionalism, just always the it's funny, and I'm sure when he hears this he'll laugh. Just always being professional in your action as well as the way you looked, being professional.
Listen here, he was the sharpest dresser when he was in high school. He got best dressed because I have always dressed very neatly and very nice.
My wife always gives me a hard time. She's like, why do you have so many suits? Like, you've got like 15 suits and you never wear them. I'm like, it's something ingrained in me. My dad always had suits, 3-piece suits with a pocket watch. That's what I know. That's what you do as a professional, and that's how I carry myself. And so I think I told him one time, and he just started laughing, and he was like, yeah, just don't show your wife my closet with all the suits I have.
All the thing I can say, you couldn't find a better person for a friend. Because just like I said, we growed up as just like brothers and sisters with Sarah. And all of us got some of the same teaching from my foreparents and things. I probably wouldn't have been as far as long as I am in life. Well, he would encourage me every time we talked. If I told him something I was doing, ideas I had, he would encourage me.
Good father. Gave him a lot of things that he didn't have in life, things that he wanted. But he let them know that he was the daddy, he was the father, and taught them how to respect other people. And they do it to this day. He and Loretta raised 2 nice young people. And I consider her as my sister. We call each other sister. We have always did that because I think she is a very, very nice person. I don't know anybody could not say Loretta is not a nice person. Now, I don't know everything and I don't know everybody, but family members, none of them say anything other than Loretta is a very nice person.
I think she did a great job with herself, with the husband, and with the kids. I don't see no room for me to think that she could have been possibly doing it better.
One of the memories of my aunt Loretta, though, is she came up for a funeral and we were both in the bathroom, and I was commenting about how beautiful I thought she was, and she looked in the mirror and she said, "Are you sure this old lady looks good?" I said, "Yes, Aunt Loretta, you look good."
Biggest impact, I would say work ethic. And now I look back, I'm like, those small adjustments had ripple effects throughout my life that I feel like if I didn't have that small adjustment, right or for wrong, I wonder where I would be right now. So the going back to get your school books, the doing the multiplication tables, the first time I got a bike, having to put the bike together by myself, just those little things, those little twists making a bigger impact on my life. So I would say I thank them for that. I'm pretty sure I probably don't do enough thank yous to them, but I would definitely say I hope they watch this, and I hope they find great pleasure in realizing that I wouldn't be who I am today without them. And I really respect and appreciate everything they've done for me.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just like being grateful for the grandparents that they are, right? Not only just in the way they helped raise me, but the way they helped raise my mom. I think, all those sorts of lessons that I've learned are like directly attributable to the stuff they did and the lives they led. And so just like being thankful, I think, is the most important thing. And just like wanting to recognize all the little things and all the little work that they've done across their lives has like helped to make me who I am. So like just wanted to call that out and share that with them.